Hey guys, it's Gote here. Before the video begins, I just want to say that if you aren't already subscribed, go ahead and do that. It's completely free and it really helps my channel out. Also feel free to drop a like and comment a suggestion for what I should make some future videos on. If you have any personal stories you would like for me to share on this channel, go ahead and send them to me via my personal email linked in the description below, and I'll be sure to include them in the future. So, with all of that out of the way, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. So this isn't my story, but rather my father's. As a coincidence of this not being my story, I can't really insist that I know what I saw and all that. All I can tell you is that I believe him, and he has no reason to lie to me. So my father has over a dozen stories like this. He grew up in rural Illinois, near a woodsy area. UFO activity was apparently high back then. I don't know if it was just my family or if it was that entire area, but my father and my grandpa would sit on the back porch and watch lights fly around the house for fun. This was a long time ago, when my father was a kid. He's in his late 60s now. They would watch the stars dart around like laser lights and laugh about it. Shit's mind-boggling to me now. I've only seen that kind of thing happen once or twice and it still freaks me out. Besides that, a bunch of other weird shit would happen to my father. Some of it is pretty similar to the stuff described in this thread, actually isolated earthquakes in Illinois that nobody else felt, bright orbs floating around in the sky and following him around, etc. It's been a while since he told me about these stories, but one of the particularly weird ones has always stuck out to me. FYI, I'm completely aware that it sounds like my father was just fucking with me, and trust me, I'd prefer to believe that, but I have good reason to trust him. For starters, he's never lied to me about anything else. He wasn't the type of person to make shit up for show. He also had absolutely nothing to gain from making this shit up. He never tried to publish it or even write it down. He would just talk about it sometimes. Anyways, so my father was in his teens, and weird UFO shit has been happening his entire life up to this point. He's out in his driveway for whatever reason, doing whatever people do when they live in a woodsy rural area, and his parents aren't home. I think at that time they're out shopping or at work, whatever. So suddenly, this big black car pulls into his driveway. Tinted windows, completely black. My father just kind of watches it pull in, not sure what to think. Something to remember here. Not only is this a rural area, but it's like 50 years ago. People were a lot more trusting back then. Nowadays, you'd be crazy to leave your front door unlocked, but back then, it was no big deal. So this strange black car pulls into my dad's driveway. It's making no noise at all, which my father notices right away. The door opens and out steps a super tall, fair-faced white man. He has blonde hair, an extremely well-tailored black suit, and black sunglasses on. Right away, my father could see that there was something off about him. He looks too perfect. Flawless skin, a childlike smile, and very overdressed for a hot summer day. He looked distinctly out of place. So the man walks up to my father and asked him for his name. My father, around 15 years old at the time, asked him why he wants to know. The man smiles and explains that he just wants to ask him a few questions and that he means no harm. Bemused, my father obliges, but he's still very wary of this strange man. First, the tall white dude asks my father if he lives here. My dad says yes and asks why he wants to know that. The man has a completely relaxed, non-confrontational tone and seems almost giddy, like he was really excited to be having this conversation. His childish, overzealous grin hadn't faded in the least. He asked my father if he had seen, felt, or heard anything that he felt was outside of the ordinary. My dad said sometimes he does, and again, why he wanted to know this kind of information. The man just kept on grinning, and by now, my father was feeling pretty uncomfortable. He had never seen this guy before in his life. He didn't even appear to be any kind of government agent. His behavior was far too unusual. Suddenly, the man's demeanor completely changes. His grin disappears and he looks worried. Without so much as a goodbye, he opens his car door, gets inside, and drives away, still making no noise at all. A couple of minutes later, my father's parents come back from shopping. Now for the really weird part. My mom saw the same frickin' dude 30 fricking years later. He was in a bookstore looking to buy something. I don't really know the details about this. When she turned around and noticed this tall, fair-looking blonde guy in a black suit sitting at a table in the cafe area, 30 feet or so away from my mother. He was reading a newspaper. Sitting across from him was another dude, dressed exactly the same as the blonde one. They still looked strangely out of place, somehow too perfect, too clean. Now, my mother had heard the story from my father before, and she actually recognized my father's description of the man. He definitely stood out. So she's kind of taken aback, trying to figure out if it's actually the man my father had seen all those years ago. The blond guy notices my mother looking at him. Again, his demeanor completely changes. He stands up, turns around, and quickly walks out of the bookstore with the second man right behind him. What the hell, right? I'm actually freaking out a bit thinking about this. I'm 22 now, and I have to wonder if I'm going to run into the same awkward blonde dude stalker sometime in my future. It's like the men in black sent this most inept agent to follow around my father. Or the most obvious alien ever is trying to study my family and our natural habitat. I have no clue. I know this is all very vague, but I'm going to bring it up to my father again tonight and try to clarify a few details. I'll be honest, I push the story out of my head because it completely freaks me out. Okay, here this one goes. The first time I had ever seen anything, I was 7 years old in Houston, Texas. I used to like to climb on top of my mother's Suburban in the driveway and stare at the stars. So this one night, I saw an intensely bright floating light over the tree line probably about a half a mile away. I hollered, but nobody came out to see it. I did not see anything else until March of 2008. Now this experience happened between the 10th and the 15th, but I can't give a specific date because I was up for 4 days trying to come up with some sort of explanation to satisfy what I had seen. This was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So my mother lived in a garden home community. All houses the same size, all one story, and you had great visibility distance-wise. I walked out of my buddy's place at exactly 4 a.m. to a bright, starry night. However, when I walked out, something caught my eye to the left of me. I looked over and saw bright blue, yellow, green, white, red, and orange strobing flashing light floating silently to the left. I stood in awe at it and did not want to go grab anyone because I didn't want to miss anything. I watched as it passed in front of the moon behind my friend's place, and I saw the outline of the craft. It was a teardrop, sunflower seed type shape, and the craft seemed to have the lights being transmitted from the top half of it. It was almost as if it was transmitting some type of light pattern upwards. It also had a dark, thin, smooth line of exhaust that disappeared 50 to 75 feet behind it. This all occurred no less than 400 yards away from me. After it passed the moon, I ran inside and grabbed someone. He saw it, but it was too far away to make out what exactly it was. I went home, which was only a few blocks away, and looked out from the driveway, the same direction the first craft had come from. I saw two dim white lights slowly coming across the horizon at a slow pace, heading towards me. I then ran inside and grabbed my mother out of bed. We stood there for about 20 minutes while 5 separate crafts flew right over us. First came two, then one, about 6 to 7 minutes apart from each other. Maybe 20 miles an hour, maybe 200 feet up, completely silent. The way that they looked from underneath was each one had two huge bright white lights, which were maybe 30 to 40 feet across each, but they were so bright it was hard to get a good estimate. They also had a pulsating red one between the white lights that dimmed and relit itself. I would estimate that the size of the white lights that each craft was maybe about 150 to 200 feet wide. The last craft that flew over us flew much lower and slower than the first four had. Then it let out a sound that to this day haunts me. These crafts flew directly over us, and I believe that the sound was an acknowledgement. Whatever was piloting it knew we were watching it, kind of like a hello. I immediately started crying. I had no idea what I was looking at or what I had just heard. Now, the second big experience I had occurred a couple weeks later. I was standing in my driveway, smoking a cigarette, listening to my iPod somewhere around 2 a.m. I then decided to pause my iPod to turn on the black light, waved my hand over it a couple of times, making somewhat of a strobe pattern. I didn't really hear anything, I didn't even see anything come up, but I got that being watched kind of feeling. I looked up, and directly above me was a trapezoid-shaped craft with rounded edges that had a dark red and black pulsating, glowing outline. It was like flowing electricity. It was not even 75 feet up. I could have hit this thing with a rock if I wanted to. So I stood there while it hovered directly above me, completely silent for maybe about 10 to 15 seconds while it made this kind of motion similar to the ball that Luke trained with in Star Wars. It hovered from side to side, front and back in a smooth motion, never getting more than 20 feet away from its original position. It was extremely fascinating, but I was frozen stiff. After those few seconds, I waved one hand at it in a friendly manner. It was then that it changed light patterns and hovered away behind my house. Upon deeper inspection, the fact that it knew that I saw it but made no effort to evade my detection makes me think it wanted me to follow it, although I was really too freaked out to think about that at that moment. I've seen the same craft on 3 other separate occasions, once again in Tuscaloosa, once in Hoover, and once in Bessemer. The time I saw it in Hoover was at an apartment complex at the top of a huge hill with a great overlook. It was nighttime and I was with my friends. Over the overlook, I saw a gray craft facing my direction that looked similar to a Hoth fighter. Forgive the Star Wars references. And as soon as I saw it, it took off to the right silently, extremely quick. The times in Bessemer and Tuscaloosa, the trapezoid shape appeared in the sky solid white, stretched to twice its length. Then the bottom shot up to the front like it hit light speed or something. I do frequently see what I like to call streaks. They look like shooting stars, only very low, move slower, but they still have the tails that stream behind them. They can also appear in many different colors. One strange story is one night when I had a dream in Tuscaloosa. In the dream, I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel things. I was laying on something cold, and I felt what seemed like rubber between my legs around my junk. It was very strange to me since a lot of people who report abductions report sperm and eggs being taken for breeding programs. The next morning, I went to let the dogs out in the backyard, which is very small. To the left of the patio, there was a solid white ring in the glass that was maybe 10 to 8 feet wide. I showed my mother, and she had told me that she heard a noise that woke her up the night before, but she just dismissed it. Another extremely confusing experience I had occurred in my driveway in Tuscaloosa. To give you an idea of where this occurred, look up Shelton State Community College. The house was less than a quarter mile from the campus in the Inglewood neighborhood. It was nighttime and I heard this static that I could compare to a jet. I looked over and directly above the community college was a light blue slit in the sky. I would say it was maybe 200 yards long, completely vertical, and had what looked like white electric currents coming off of both sides. I looked at it, and maybe about 25 white things shot out of it and went to the left. After they passed, the bottom of the slit went upward until the slit closed, and it made a strange sound. And then it was gone. I've also had a bunch of experiences with orbs. Some solid lit that float across the sky or move in strange patterns, and some that brighten up to a great intensity and then fade as they pass. After that first big experience, I started doing some research because I was so confused. I understand that I've had an abnormally large amount of experiences, and I honestly can't tell you why. I wish I could. I found a type of UFO witness called a contactee. These people are similar to abductees, except they are kept up with. I have no idea why I have so many experiences, and I have only a fraction of them. My best guess is that since I acknowledged the presence of what it was I was seeing, it decided to keep up with me. It's kind of a gift and kind of a curse. There are so few people that I can actually have legitimate conversations about this. I want to seek hypnotherapy to see if there might be anything else I could uncover. I'm grateful, but still don't know much about my experiences. If y'all can get anything out of what I just shared with you, then great. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Hey guys, it's Gotea here. Thank you so much for listening to this video. Aliens and UFOs are absolutely an interesting topic, and I had a lot of fun making this video. So if any of you have any personal stories you would like for me to share on this channel, go ahead and send them to me via my personal email linked in the description below, and I'll be sure to include them in a future video. So with all that said, thank you so much again, and I will see you mates in the next episode.